All right, it looks like we're recording, so I will go ahead and get started here. Welcome to, can't believe it is September, but it is September. Welcome to September's office hours, and this month we are going to be doing a Primo Potpourri. So for the agenda today, we've got just the general announcements and reminders, and then a Primo VE potpourri of customizations, and you can see all of the interesting things that my colleague Jessica Gibson will be covering today. And a reminder that the iShare Liaisons webinar will be held on Wednesday, September 14th from 3 to 4 p.m. And what this is a review of the roles and responsibilities for our iShare Liaisons. Although we encourage the liaisons to attend, it is not required. You may register on the Carly website, and the session will be recorded. And a few announcements about things that are upcoming, and I will put the Carly calendar into the chat so you have the URL for that. And all of these things and more can be found on the Carly calendar. The upcoming office hours, we hold office hours on the second Thursday of each month from 2 to 3 p.m. So after today's session, the next session will be on October 13th. We also have Let's Talk About Fulfillment sessions. They're held on some Fridays of each month from 2 to 3:30 p.m. And the next session for that will be September 16th. And finally, the technical services Q&A sessions. The next session for that will be held Wednesday, September 21 from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock p.m. And then there is a URL there for looking at the past sessions. And again, all these events are on the Carly calendar, including other events that I haven't mentioned here, like our PDA programming and more. And a final announcement here, I will let Denise jump in on this one for the Alma Electronic Resources update.
Thanks very much. Many of you work at libraries that made purchasing decisions that were implemented at the beginning of the fiscal year. Usually that's July 1st. So this is a good time to just double check and make sure that your electronic collections in your Alma institution zone match up with your current purchasing decisions. If you've added new collections or subscriptions to standalone journals, for example, make sure those are activated. Deactivate at minimum and preferably delete collections or titles if you no longer subscribe and have no reason to keep that information long term. And as always, double check that any authentication changes you made over the summer, like switching to Open Athens or setting up a new campus or something like that, make sure that your newly activated electronic collections all work with your current authentication setup. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Denise. And so we will go ahead and get started. I am going to turn the presentation over to Jessica Gibson. And before I do that, I will put a link into the chat that Jessica has already kindly and nicely put the slides for this presentation up on the Carly website already. There is the link there to the PDF of the slides for this. So if you want to follow along at home or you want links to anything that she's covering, I will be putting all of the links that she discusses here in the chat, but there it is for the slides already on the Carly website. So I will be quiet now and turn it over to Jessica.
Thanks so much, Amy. So when I was preparing today's presentation, I was trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about, and we wanted it to be Primo VE related. We haven't done one of those in a while. And I just came up with so many different ideas that Primo VE Potpourri came to mind as an appropriate title. So what you'll see here today are just a collection of configurations, settings, customizations that you may or may not be aware of. Most of them are changes that have come out since we went live in June 2020, so they may have slipped under your radar. None of them are required. They are all optional, and they all are just up to your institution as to whether or not you would like to utilize them. So we'll start the presentation with some friendly disclaimers. You'll always want to consult with all the stakeholders at your library before making any changes, including any that we talk about today, that will affect the behavior of your Primo VE interface. For most of us, it's the beginning of a new year, and I'm sure that your reference and instruction colleagues will thank you for not changing things out from under them while they're in the middle of bibliographic instruction prime time season. It's always a good idea to keep a change log. A future you or future someone else will thank present you for keeping track of the changes that are made and recording maybe the rationale behind why you made a particular change or made a particular choice. In many cases, the Carly iShare sandboxes and or Primo VE test views within your own Alma IZ will allow you to preview changes that we talk about today before committing to making that change in production. And there's a little asterisk here because in future slides, I tried to make a note at the bottom in the footer as to which, whether it's the sandbox or a test view that I think would be most applicable for testing something. If you're updating or changing your Primo VE configuration package, an important reminder to save a copy of those old customization package zip files before uploading a new one. Alma only contains the most recently uploaded one. So if there's a problem with it, you may need to rely on that old version, or if there's a really big problem with it, you might want to swap the old version back in while you work on fixing it. So Alma's not going to keep track of those old zip files and customization packages for you. You'll really want to save your own archive yourself. And finally, for most of these things we'll be talking about today, the changes can be made or the configuration set by someone with a discovery admin role, except where noted. I tried to note on the slides where you maybe need a different role. So information on the Alma and Primo VE sandboxes can be found here on the Carly website. It is also very easy to create test views in Primo VE simply by duplicating an existing view. And the benefit to that, when it's applicable, is that you'll have all of your current customizations in your production view that are already set up, and then you'll be able to make incremental or individual changes for testing in a test view that you have duplicated. And again, just to note that throughout the rest of the presentation, with each feature that we discuss, watch for the testing recommendation location that I've put in the purple slide footer here. All right, so let's jump into the first, well, I guess technically this is a reminder rather than something new that you may or may not want to do, because this is happening. And in November, with the November 6th software release, Primo VE is upgrading their version of Angular, which is related to JavaScript, to 1.8. And they have announced that this upgrade may affect any local JavaScript customizations that you've made to your Primo VE. So this Ex Libris website linked here contains all the details you'll need to know about on the changes, including information on how to test your Primo VE site now to look for any issues, how to adjust your customizations if issues are found, and other frequently asked questions that you might have. It's really quite handy. You're able to test your Primo VE now by just adding a small parameter to the end of the URL that they explain there on that website. And that way you'll be able to see very quickly and easily if there's anything that will break when they migrate to Angular on November 6th. Carly will also be testing the customizations that we've posted on the Carly website, and we'll issue an announcement about any changes that might be needed there. So now we jump into the potpourri. The first item is the Give Us Feedback tool. So this new built-in functionality allows you to solicit feedback from your users without having to install any custom CSS or JavaScript code or create electronic services to send users to an external form to provide feedback. This is built right into Primo VE. You can have up to 4 categories that a user can choose from, and the tool is configurable by Primo VE view. So if you have multiple views, you can set the feedback up differently if you'd like. The tool sends email to one or more email addresses that you put in the Alma configuration, and the email itself, the text of what it says, is configurable in Alma with the report a problem letter. So you would be able to add anything that you wanted to give staff information about how this feedback was provided by the user. The documentation there that's listed for the configuring the feedback tool goes over more of the details, and I have already configured it to be on in the Knox sandbox if you'd like to take a look there and just see what it looks like and open it and see how it might work for your users and its location. There aren't a lot of customizations available with it now, but because it's a new feature and Ex Libris has been getting a lot of feedback on the new feedback tool, they are making enhancements, and there are planned to be more enhancements and options for the November feature release that'll be coming up. And last bit, all labels can be changed and configured, of course, as with many labels in Primo VE. Semi-related to the feedback tool is that now, as a bit of added security, you can add reCAPTCHA to both the email action that would be found on the brief results and the full record page, and this Give Us Feedback tool both, so that when users are prompted to send email from Primo VE, you can add this little bit of security if you desire. The configuration, if you set it up, will apply to both the email action and the feedback tool. You can't selectively apply reCAPTCHA feature to just one of them at this particular time. So for more information, you'll want to see the Ex Libris documentation. It explains exactly how to get reCAPTCHA keys and configure them in Alma. And again, the labels are configurable here as well. On to the next item. Some of you may have noticed when viewing the details section of the full record page in Primo VE that the subject headings listed there are displaying in the same order as they might occur in the MARC record. And this is the default behavior, but a new feature has come out so that you can configure these subjects to be sorted in alphabetical order just for the Primo VE display. You cannot select which kind of subjects you want to apply this sort to. So if you have, for example, some in English and some in French, some MESH, some Library of Congress, it will just alphabetize everything that is displaying under the subject label field. It won't alphabetize them by type. But if you might like for them to be ordered in a slightly different way rather than having to edit the bibliographic record to put them in alphabetical order, which is probably not a good use of your time. This feature is easy to customize by just setting the subject's alphabetical sort full parameter to true in the Alma configuration customer settings for Primo VE. And again, as an example, I have set this up in the UIS sandbox. So if you want to go there and do some searching, look at some full record views, you will see that the subjects should be in alphabetical order. Next, we'll go through a few of the options for search profiles that include Central Discovery Index or CDI results. So just make sure we're all on the same page. A search profile enables your library to define groups of records that meet specific conditions for your users to search in Primo VE. The groups may contain records that belong to the central index, to a specific library, to the iShare network, to a specific location, a set of locations, etc. And in Primo VE, you can have a search profile that searches just the central index or CDI itself, or you can have blended search profiles that include central index data and say your library data, or the central index data and your library data and the network data, all as part of one scope. So these options that we'll be discussing next, these three, can apply to any search profile that includes the central index. And there are three of them we'll talk about: filter by availability, exclude CDI ebooks, and search in full text. An important note about search profiles before we leave this page: they are global and they are used in all Primo VE views. So in order to test them without affecting your current production search profiles, your strategy would need to be you'd add a new testing search profile to basically duplicate the one that's currently in use, and then change the settings in that test search profile, and then also create a test view for Primo VE and activate the new testing search profile that you created in the test view. And that'll make sure that you aren't changing the behavior of your production environment. Oh, and as a final note, I have enabled, configured all three of these options to be on in the UIS Sandbox articles search scope if you want to do any playing around there. Okay, so we'll dig into the first one, filter by availability. So the filter by availability option can be checked or not. It's a checkbox on off. You would check it if you want Primo VE to display results from the CDI only if they have full text options available for your users. So when this is on, users can always choose to expand my results from the Primo VE facets to show results that don't have full text, using that little expand my results toggle that you may see in the facet section on the side. You would leave this option unchecked if you wanted Primo VE to display all CDI records by default, even those without full text access for your users. And then for your users to facet only to the things that they do have full text access to, they would do that by applying the available online facet. And that would limit it then to only the things that they have full text access to. So I know of some iShare libraries who have it one way and some that have it the other, and they each have their individual reasons, but it's a very powerful setting that dramatically changes your search results. So you want to think about it and make sure you understand what it's doing and how it might be changing if you're going to change what you've already got set there. And here's just an example of a Primo VE search display, results display, showing where in a default environment, the expand my results toggle and the available online facet are. So the second option we'll discuss is the exclude CDI ebooks checkbox. So this began back in November of 2021 release. Ex Libris introduced what they're calling phase 1 of this configuration to exclude ebooks from CDI search results in Primo VE. So this option was meant to help reduce duplicate results for the same title when they come from both your ALMA and the CDI, when a library preferred to use their own ebook cataloging records instead of records from the CDI. However, turning on this option, I guess, during phase 1 actually filtered all ebook records from the CDI search results. So it was an all or nothing kind of checkbox. So if you hadn't locally cataloged your ebooks in ALMA, it was potentially removing quite a bit of access to anything that was just coming from the CDI, when that's the only place that the results were available from. So for that reason, many libraries found this unsatisfactory and did not enable it at this time. But Ex Libris continued working, and in the second phase of the enhancement to exclude CDI ebooks that just arrived in August 2022, so just last month, the configuration option now excludes CDI ebooks records only for collections that have portfolios active in ALMA, instead of filtering out all ebook records from the CDI search results. And books from database collections will also continue to appear in the CDI search results. So they have listened to the customers who said, wow, thank you for trying to reduce duplication in our search results. But wow, that was too much. That was kind of an all or nothing approach, wasn't good enough. So they've gone back and added some refinements here. So for example, now under phase 2, if you were to use this option, if you enable the setting and have active portfolios in eCollections for Wiley and JSTOR ebooks, these ebooks will not be returned by searches of the Central Discovery Index, but ebooks from different eCollections you have active, like HathiTrust, or excuse me, that you don't have active, say from HathiTrust or other eCollections, will be returned records from the CDI. And a special note, if your library is using Rapido or thinking of using Rapido, the documentation does say that this is not an appropriate setting for you. I don't know how up to date that documentation is, so I would recommend that you check with your Ex Libris Rapido support team before enabling this setting if you are using it or plan to use it. And finally, our third option for the CDI searches is, it's called Search in FT, but it stands for Search in Full Text. So this setting will configure whether searches check indexed full text for matches on search terms and whether or not users can override the setting themselves in Primo VE. By default, the configuration for this setting is set to no always, which means that full text is never checked for matches to the search query and users cannot change this behavior. Clicking on the Edit Full Text Search configuration from the ellipsis that was shown on the previous slide will open the screen to enable the following choices for including or excluding full text matches in the CDI records. So your 4 choices are yes always, yes per end user selection, no always, which is the default, and no per end user selection. If it is set to one of the yes options, then search results will include items even if the search terms are not in the citation metadata, so long as those terms are in the full text of the document, and so long as that full text document is indexed. Setting it to one of the no options will find search results terms only in the citation metadata itself. And the per end user selection option will create a slider in Primo VE for the user to toggle this on or off themselves, sort of change it from yes to no themselves. So here is just an example screen from, again, our UIS sandbox, where it shows that toggle when it appears is very similar to that expand my results toggle on the same side of the, right above the facets there. So for more, I've just covered sort of the surface. So for more details on these 3 options, you'll want to go to the Ex Libris documentation, scroll down to this chart entitled Valid Scope Types and see the section on Central Index, where it discusses more about these 3 options and others that I didn't cover necessarily in more detail. All right, on to yet another possible thing that you might like to do. Another new feature is that in addition to metadata provided in the bibliographic record, Primo VE now supports the indexing of holdings metadata information, so users can search for it for what's included in the holdings record. So after this feature is configured in Alma, and after your holdings records have appropriate data, and after the holdings records have been re-indexed, then users in Primo VE will be able to perform basic and advanced searches to find records based on those holdings data that you've configured as being indexed and searchable. So for more information, you can see this Ex Libris documentation page, but I happen to know after answering a few questions for them, that the Newberry Library in particular is already using this feature to expose some of their unique holdings metadata for search. And as far as I know, they seemed pretty happy with it. So maybe during the Q&A, you could let us know how they like it. And in fact, with any of these features, if your library is using it, we'd love to hear from you during the Q&A portion. Our next feature here is called Quick Links. So CDI, or Central Discovery Index Quick Links, is a feature that embeds links to PDF and HTML full text directly into the brief display in Primo VE. So the brief display is the display that you see on a search results page. And it is also, the brief display is then replicated at the top of the full results page. So it will be both in the search results page and then also in the information that's on the top of the full record page. According to Ex Libris, this provides a convenient and quick way for users to access full text from CDI with a single click. Libraries often have access to several platforms for the same item, but with quick links, the system will show only one link of each type, PDF and HTML. But users who are familiar with different platforms and maybe prefer to select the link themselves from a particular platform can always click into the full record from the search results page and continue to select from all of the options provided in the View Online section of the full record. So this is really just meant to be a quick and easy way for users not to have to sort of click into that full record. Ex Libris currently provides quick links for selected content providers, and right now there are 19, but they have assured everyone that they are continuing to work with new providers so that the list of providers will grow over time. And I have to say, after attending several Ex Libris webinars about various and sundry Primo VE things, and also content webinars from the Central Discovery Index staff, they are very excited about quick links, and they really think that quick links will make a dramatic and positive impact on your user experience. So it is something there for you to consider. It's a very simple checkbox in your view. And if you'd like to read more about it, again, there is provided the Ex Libris documentation page on quick links. Our next feature is one that I only recently learned a little bit about after a question from one of our iShare libraries. But by default, the Get It section of the full record display page is where users see the physical holdings at your library. And in that Get It section previously, the locations were generally sorted in alphabetical order, and you didn't necessarily have a way to change that. With this enhancement called Custom Libraries Order, you can now create a default sort order by library, either for all views or for individual views to allow for custom ordering per view. So this may be useful for an institution who has a customized view for different libraries in ALMA. Let's say you've got a separate Primo VE view for your archives, which has its own library in ALMA. And you suspect that users of that view, of the archives view, will likely care most about the holdings that are at the archives over holdings in any of your other libraries because they've chosen to come to the archives view for one reason or another. So with this feature, for that archives view only, you can configure it so that the archives library location holdings will display first in the Get It section before other libraries at your institution. This configuration also displays the preferred holdings in the brief results availability statement in search results. So that was a lot of words. Let's look at an example in action. I learned about this when Wheaton College asked a question of it, or asked a question about if something like this was possible. They have a main Primo VE view shown here on the left in blue, and the holdings for an example record in Get It below. And then they have a separate library in ALMA for their Wade Center and a separate Primo VE view seen here in green with its Get It section below. they were able to use this feature to have the Wade Center library holdings appear first or above any of the other library holdings in both the brief results view there at the top and in the Get It section of the full record page. So that was a handy and new thing that I wanted to share with all of you, as I had only recently learned about it. Next random feature. For electronic journals managed in Alma, there is an option to display a coverage summary by year in the availability statement in the results on the library search and journal search pages. This is designed to reduce the need to view the journal's full display to get that important coverage information. The coverage summary will include a maximum of 3 date ranges, and if there are more than 3, the summary will include a more label for the user to click. The date ranges come from the portfolio in Alma. Now, Ex Libris does have some disclaimers on this one. Because the coverage information is calculated by Primo VE in real time, it doesn't appear instantly in the results, and they may load over time. So that may be something that is distasteful to you and you don't want to wait for that. That's understandable. If a journal is available with no limitations and its portfolios don't contain any date ranges, then no coverage information will display in the availability statement, which makes sense. If there's nothing there to display, it won't show anything. The coverage information may include only a single embargo, and if multiple embargoes exist, only one of them will appear on the coverage. If there are more than 3 date ranges in the coverage, the embargo will be excluded from the coverage if it exists. So there are a lot of little if-thens there, depending on what kind of data you have for coverage in your portfolios. But it is an easy thing to try turning on in the brief results journal coverage parameter of the customer settings. It's just a matter of changing that to true. So there are no other configurations or specifications you can make to it. It's just an on or an off sort of thing. But it might be something that you'd like to investigate if you do use a lot of this coverage information and want to provide it to your users kind of a step sooner than the full record page. So next up, the Disable Edit option in the personal details of my library card. In many cases, we know that borrow information comes directly from a campus information system and is loaded from that system into Alma, and that is the source. And so it cannot or should not be modified from within Primo VE. So with this very easy option, that edit button that Primo VE has naturally can be hidden on the personal details tab in the My Library card. Since, as I mentioned, changes made by users in Primo VE would have no effect on the campus information system. So even if they are able to edit it here, it wouldn't actually go back and edit the source and could just be a cause of confusion. Generally speaking, if a user wants to change their official personal details, address, name, phone number, etc., with your institution, they'd need to do that at your institutional level. And then for those of you that use the SIS process, that information would be loaded from that campus system into Alma. So if you'd like to make sure that this edit button isn't there, leading users potentially astray, there is a simple checkbox in your view that you can go in and make sure it is unchecked to not enable the edit in My Library card. Just a couple more here. So by default, the not available status that we all know and love in Primo VE will appear for any item that is not available. However, there is a nice configuration setting that you can enable that will provide actually more details on why the item is not available. And that is, again, in one of these customer settings where you set a parameter to true. When set to true, single item records that are not available will now display with additional information. And yes, those labels as to what comes after the not available and the not available itself are customizable in Primo VE. So they will be expanded from not just not available, but not available lost, not available on loan, not available missing, not available transit. Just giving users and possibly library staff who are looking at the items in Primo VE a little bit more information about maybe why the item is not available. And that might perhaps give them ideas about whether or not they should follow up with other ways to get the item, or perhaps follow up with library staff and find out if, say, it's not available because it's in process. Gosh, could you put a rush on that because I really need this item? And I have also configured this one in the UIS sandbox and the Knox sandbox. If you'd like to go there and try to find some not available items and see what that looks like. And finally, our last potpourri item of the day is to let you know that if you have license term data from electronic resources, those can display in Primo VE in the View It section of the full record. It is a simple checkbox. This one's hiding in the fulfillment area, so you would have to be a general sysadmin or a fulfillment admin to be able to get here. But it's a checkbox to enable display of license information. And then if you've got any license terms in your portfolios, they will display there in the View Online section with a Show License link that will open and then show the license details below that particular item of full text. Again, link to the Ex Libris documentation for more information on this miscellaneous display option, as the URL says. So with that, I have covered all of my potpourri items. Please feel free to give us your questions here. We'll open it up for questions about anything that you saw here today. If your institution is using one of these things or has been using it, we'd love to, I'm sure your colleagues would love to hear about that. Love to hear how it's been successful for you, what you like about it. And yeah, with that, let us know what is on your mind.
Great. Well, I will start with the questions that have popped up in the chat while you were talking about things. The first one we have is, does the exclude CDI ebooks option take into consideration network zone records or only institution zone records?
That is a very good question that I did not think to ask. I believe some testing may need to be done to answer that with assurance. I would hope that it would take into consideration the network zone records, but as we have learned over the last 2+ years, sometimes the network zone is an afterthought for some of the things that Ex Libris does. So I would not assume that.
This is Denise. I'm not sure either, Jessica. I'd have to check it out. I mean, we are talking about the blended search, and the network zone ebooks are in that search. But that's a good question. We'll have to experiment.
Great, thank you. The next question we have from Leslie, is there a way to add a note to the My Library card to indicate where patrons can go to update their personal information on campus?
That is a question I believe I have investigated before, and I found a couple of what seemed to me and to the iShare library that asked unsatisfactory ways to add a note. I think the ultimate way to do it was to inject some JavaScript to stick a note in where you wanted it, because the places that we investigated, such as changing a label or adding a little bit of information to an existing label, were not very robust in terms of if the wording was too long or the screen was too small. There were some, I think the short answer there is not a easily configurable way, but I believe it certainly would be possible with more advanced customization.
That would also be a great thing for someone to put an idea exchange in. I know there's a lot about my library card and things people wish my library card could do, but maybe that would be a good one if there was a way to make it a little more customizable to put your own notes in. So
Very
if
good
anyone
point.
wants to take up the banner of that, that would be awesome. And those were all the questions we have for now. We can open it up to discussion if there's anything anyone else would like to ask, or we can open it up to general discussion.
Yeah, for sure. We can expand from the Primo VE Potpourri to this is a Alma Primo VE open office hours. So be happy to entertain your questions on anything related.
It looks like Steve has a question about iShare requests and how it shows up in Primo. And Steve, you're welcome to unmute yourself, and if it's easier. Okay, good.
Sorry about that. Can you see me as well? I have actually an open ticket about this, but I would prefer to just ask it now instead of me grinding it into another email. And that is about, we're trying to circulate these cameras. And there's this, that, and the other thing with the records in Primo VE. And the current issue is that there is a iShare link or a request showing up in the record, and that's not ideal for us. We would just want it to be requestable on the item level. It's best if I share my screen. So to kind of show you what I'm talking about. See if I can share screen.
I believe I own your ticket about the cameras.
Oh yeah,
I do, Steve. And it is a known issue that the iShare request link appears in places where it shouldn't. And that has been a sort of the bane of our existence since we went live. There are some upcoming changes that we are very excited about and hope to be announcing soon. The Carly resource sharing team has just seen a presentation yesterday from my colleague Debbie about some new configuration options that we're hoping to be able to make available that will reduce the frustration when users have an iShare request that that is obviously cannot be filled. It'll prevent them hopefully from being able to submit that request at all to reduce that frustration. So that is a start to that. But yes, there are places where it does appear where it shouldn't. Yeah,
again, these are in-house requests for stuff that these are just our patrons going up to the CERT desk and just requesting it. You know, they're requesting it and then just retrieving it from the CERT desk. And you know, I tried like doing something in the display logic, like an if-then kind of thing, to just mask that link, but it's not a resource sharing request per se, and that was the problem. It's like you can't, as far as I know, you can't suppress a request link, a specific type of request link, which iShare is. It's just not possible. So we would get people submitting their requests through iShare, and we would get it would be hidden in the pick from shelf list because it went through an iShare request, and that's not something that we typically check. So I guess for now, our workaround will just be check that pick from shelf list, as well as the monitor resource requests link. And is that correct? Simply because we can't suppress that link.
So this is Debbie, and I'm just gonna pop in here. So for those cameras, since you want your local patrons to be able to place those requests. Those requests, since they're placed by local patrons, those also show up in the pick from shelf list. local requests come in that list as well. So it's not that
Oh.
they were submitted through iShare, that's just kind of the common process that local requests show up in the pick from shelf list as well.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have much experience in circulation. I was just okay. All right.
There should be some facets on the left-hand side of the pick from shelf list that would allow library staff to use those facets to limit by the pickup location. So if the pickup
Right.
location is your own institution, chances are those are local requests by your patrons. That would allow them to say like, oh, this is a local request for that item.
Okay.
But it is a typical scenario that when your patron places a request for your items, it will show up in the pick from shelf list.
Okay, that's good to know. And the
Yeah,
final.
So that request it's probably not coming through the iShare link. If your patrons were clicking the iShare link, that would be a request being sent out to other iShare libraries, which since there aren't cameras at other iShare libraries, they would be immediately canceled, which is what Jessica mentioned the resource sharing committee is looking at.
Okay, I see. And then to just be sure, there's no way to suppress the iShare link.
Jessica has done some work with this, or help libraries do work with display logic rules. And Jessica, please feel free, you know more about this than me, but like if it's available locally to not show the iShare link, I'm not sure if that would be a thing that would work in this situation. Where they've got cameras at the institution, they only want them to be locally requestable. They don't want to also show an iShare link.
Yeah.
Right. There are display logic rules that can do exactly what Debbie just said, which is when there is an item available locally, suppress the iShare request link. But that doesn't sound that, first of all, that would apply across the board to all of your items. So
that's what
any local items that you have that are available would not show an iShare request link. And in this case, it doesn't sound like it would really help anyway, because as we mentioned, that there aren't any cameras at iShare libraries. So this is kind of a known limitation. If there is an iShare link showing up and there are no holdings at the iShare library currently, that is a known issue that we cannot fix. But we, as I say, we are working on this new option that we are very excited about.
Okay. All right. And just one other issue is when I try to change the material type of the cameras in Primo VE, I tried editing the bib record in the leader field. It's the 6th position, and I want to change it to a kit. And when I put in the corresponding code for kit in the 6th position in the leader field and the mark record, it still does not display the cameras as a kit. It's either still a book or just this kind of item not found generic icon. And there is an error in the metadata editor saying that that is not a legitimate character or value for this field.
Yep. Well, if you would send that example back on that ticket, like I say, I own your ticket, and I know I told you that the material type in ALMA does not match the Primo VE resource type. Those are two different types that are calculated by ALMA differently than by Primo. So if what I had let you know to do did not work, that would surprise me, and I'd want to look into that further, because the Primo VE resource type should be driven by that mark bib data leader 06 if you wanted to change that to a kit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And from Sarah, this says you could try changing the language of the request button so that you could change the label to request from here, request from iShare. That was a big help for them. So that's another option of just changing those labels. And
yes, as we say all the time, many of those labels in Primo VE are completely customizable. So if you see one that you think could be made more clear, like Sarah is saying, it probably can. You just have to decide, amongst your institution what that should be, which might be harder than making the decision to change it itself.
And I'll stick our early web page about changing labels into the chat. And a question from Kyle just came in. Can you remind me or point me to documentation about what the different criteria are that result in multiple bib records being grouped into a single record in Primo? Is it matching 035 fields, matching 020 fields, others?
Many things. Enjoy this page. This is the well, maybe I can share this page. Let me stop sharing this. And I can try
That
to
was a
share.
very heavy sigh, Jessica.
I mean, this page is, it's dense, but the answer is many things can cause a match. Having trouble finding my screen share button. There we go. Here we go. So this is the understanding the dedupe and Ferber processes in Primo VE page. It explains a little bit about what they are, and then it explains in great detail how it comes up with the keys that it uses to determine what is a match. There's a table for dedupe, there's a table for Ferber, and then other information on how it makes normalization methods. So the way that you know how something, what records are being matched, is to use the tool, which here I am in the UIS sandbox again. You'll need to go into configuration and into discovery, and there is a dedupe and Ferber test utility. In this test utility, you choose either Ferber or dedupe, whichever bit of information that you want to know about. And then in this first tab, you can input an MMS ID and click Find Matching Records, and it will show you all of the matches that it considers to be a dedupe, or in this case, Ferber, for that particular record. Or if you have two records and you want to know very specifically how do these two records match each other or not, it will tell you that. Again, you choose either for Ferber or dedupe, put in the MMS ID in here and the second MMS ID in there and compare, and it will give you, it will give you information about which of these keys that are defined on this page match those two records. Definitely an it's complicated answer. Yeah.
Jessica, I just wanted to add in that what also happens in Primo VE is you have central discovery index records feeding into the searches, depending on how you've defined that particular search slot. And I don't think they use those records. I don't think they use that same criteria. I wish they did, but yeah, sometimes what looks like duplicates is coming from CDI information too. So.
That is a very good point. The central discovery index and your local indexes in your IZ and the NZ are not deduplicated or Ferberized. They are two completely separate indexes that Ex Libris says they cannot deduplicate. So in those cases, when you're using any kind of search scope that is searching a blended search scope with results from the CDI and results from local ALMA or the network, those are not going to be deduplicated by these algorithms. Now, Kyle says that's a really neat tool. It is a really neat tool.
Great, and the next question we have, I've been experimenting with MarcEdit ALMA integration for Sandbox. I'm able to get bib records from ALMA and get them edited in MarcEdit, but there are no changes when the records get uploaded back to the Sandbox. I'm wondering if the problem was with my setting or the fact that I'm trying to update network zone records.
Hey, Renata, this is Ted Schwitzer, and I worked on this a little bit yesterday since you had a colleague share a ticket about that. And it does seem to be that maybe there's a setting affecting your work because I was able to get a change to go through. But so I think we probably want to set up further time to examine what your settings are and what is necessary, because there could be something just not set right in Marquetta.
Great, thank you, Ted.
Okay.
The next question, can dedupe be done as a report to obtain multiple duplicates in a report?
I was muted, sorry. I was just going to show here what this report or what the output of this test utility looks like. And I stuck an MMS ID in the tool, and now I'm in the sandbox and I'm waiting for it to come back. But what I was going to show, and will show if it returns results here, is that the chart that you will see at the bottom of the tool or of the test utility, you can click, there's, as in many places in Alma, there's an export to Excel feature. There we go. Oh, this one had a lot. That's probably, it was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So there are many matches here. So you can see all of them here. And then as with many places in Alma, you can export the list to Excel and get a report of the test utilities output in that way. I don't know if Alma Analytics actually has dedupe or Ferber reporting. That is not something I have ever looked into.
This is Jen Mascadrelli. I was just going to say that it's important that to note that this is about what Primo considers a duplicate in Ferber, not what is literally a duplicate.
Very good point.
Just as a kind of a side note, it's not actual duplicates, it's just what it's creating for display for your users. Yeah.
And there is a page about this tool as well. I will stick into the chat, lets you know a little bit more about how that utility works.
Fantastic. Well, we have just 3 more minutes here until the top of the hour, so we have time for maybe one more question. Anyone? No, I'm not seeing any more questions come in, but thank you very much, Jessica, for all the very good information that you've presented today. We really appreciate it. All good, useful things that people may want to go and play around in the sandboxes or take a look at their customizations and configurations in Primo VE and see what they can do. Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you next month at office hours.
Thank you, everybody.